You can tell I got stacks on there, I need a ruler. Got that money too long, get it for the low like a nigga got a coupon.
My boss is all about fetty. Traps on fire so the streets gon' talk. If you keep quiet, we can feed the whole block.
Your face don't ring a bell, but your ass do. I know you from somewhere, but today you looking brand new.
Look, let me tell you about a kid named Steven. He's slowly running out of things to believe in.
So I seen her like, the way you're wearing that dress, shorty, what's your name? Don't mean to be rude.
Look in my eyes.
Welcome. How you doing? Thank you. I'm Rauiri from PMC Speaker Company. I've been doing a really shitty job of telling you all about what I do and who we are and what we are. So I'm going to take 2 minutes before we start Marc's presentation to tell you. So, who all had heard of PMC before we came here? Nobody. Okay. So, PMC are a speaker company out of London. Really high-end stuff. Our flagship speakers are those guys there, the BB5s. A pair of those are 135 grand. Timberland bought a rig this year from us. I put it in myself with Maurice. And Timberland, with that speaker system, is the loudest thing I've ever heard in my life. It's insane how loud that man works. When they were working on the Justin Timberlake record, they finished it on our speakers. They did a lot of work on our speakers. We've just got endless amounts of users. Beyonce and Jay-Z just bought a bunch of our stuff. Kanye just finished using some of our stuff on a record. Tons and tons of mastering guys, tons of movie scoring guys. You've heard records. The Santi Gold, there's Rich Costi, the mix engineer, Michael Brower, who does all the Coldplay records, and all those guys. Obviously, you guys aren't spending $135,000 on speakers today. But what I have been doing, I'm a mastering engineer primarily. I work with PMC part-time. What I have been doing is listening to all of your tracks. And what's really interesting is when people put in their tracks and they say, well, that's not how it sounded at home. At home it's banging, and here it's maybe a little thin, or it's a little bright, or it's a little dull, or whatever. The most important thing you guys, any of you can own, and this is not to do with brands, this is, you know, your speakers are the most important thing. Good speakers in a decent room, so what you're hearing is what you're really hearing. I'd rather work with the free plugins in Pro Tools with good speakers than like have all badass instruments and shitty speakers. Because you can't, there's no point in doing an amazing mix, feeling really good. You get your chance to put it into some guy's hand and you say, here's my track, here's my beat, and he puts it in his car. 5 seconds later he's like, fuck this, it's boring, it's dull, it's dark, whatever. You know, you lose your shot. So, you know, as a general piece of advice, if you're going to spend money, spend them on your speakers, your headphones, make sure you're hearing what you're really hearing. One guy who does know about that, and who has made the decision, is Marc, because he owns the big bad dogs here, the $135,000 rig. And that's my segue into
still paying it off.
So this man
Sessions available.
This man has good taste. Come on up and
Sure.
And what we're gonna do is we've got about 35-40 minutes. Marc's gonna play some of his stuff. He's a mastering engineer and mix engineer here in town. We're gonna play some tracks that Marc's worked on, just to give you guys a flavour of what he's doing and hear him on the big rig. And we've got half an hour to talk about mastering. If you guys want to ask questions about how you guys work, what you need to do to prepare yourself for a mastering engineer, why you should master, anything, how to get the bottom end tight, what it is how to get level without, in your mixes without screwing things up. We can go anywhere we want. We've got, this is wide open.
Mixing wise too, because
yeah, mixing wise, of course.
That I do as well.
Yeah,
that's probably most of the stuff.
Yeah, we're all about.
Remember back in the days, man. Just to go to the club and die. You just swing, feeling good though. You just swing, you just all these Haitian niggas. Maybach music. I can't hold back all these Haitian niggas. North Miami, I can't hold back all these Haitian niggas. I can't hold back all these Haitian niggas.
I'm about to get on some other shit. This nigga had the wrong idea about Mr. Sean.
Yeah, we'll come back to it.
Yeah, no.
So I think we've proved this man knows good sound, right?
Yeah, some of the stuff, most of it, I would say about 70% of, I guess what that was, comes in from a hard drive, so it could have hit 3 or 4 different studios before it came to me. So then I take the mix, we take it to where we think it needs to be, and then we master it from there. So all of those were like that. So we touched it from the stems. We touched it from the mixes. It's usually going to different studios for all the vocalists' convenience to get their vocals down.
Does everyone know what stems are?
Oh, yeah.
No? Who knows what stems are? Okay, so we got some.
Okay,
some
so yeah, if I threw out vernacular like that. Yeah, stems are the separate tracks of your instrumental. Separate vocal tracks, not like a composite verse on a stereo track. I get to see all the ad-libs, I get to see every double, what they did with it. I can't tell you how many times we got to say, you know, he's saying 5 different things on the same verse because they rush through their vocals, so we got to kind of manipulate it. Did you want of? Would you want with? And we make it right, because that happens a lot. Then we take it to the mastering stage, and they're always like, let's push, you know, down here, let's push the bass as much as we can, and we do it. Make sure it's hitting as hard as it possibly can, and more often than not, since I'm working with the big bad boys, you could really push it, and it'll sound awesome in the studio, and I'll be the first one to say, guys, when you get to the club, with the enhanced bass that a club has, and not necessarily as much clarity, you're going to tell me it's either it's too much bass, or you can't hear the vocals. And more often than not, they're like, Mark, you're right, you come back, we tone down the bass a little bit. Yeah. And it's still booming, it's just not insane. So that happens a lot. And it's definitely helpful to have speakers. What Rauiri was saying, you can have all the best converters in the world, the best outboard gear. If you don't have speakers and you can't hear what you're hearing, you know, you can have your $2,000 Avalon compressor and your preamp and a nice mic, and you're listening through NS10s. I have nothing against NS10s. But you're not going to hear the difference between that Avalon and another preamp. You just don't have the clarity. You don't have the resolution. So you don't have to spend that much, but you see even the little guys, it's just clear. You can hear what you do. You turn an EQ knob, and you hear what you just did, and it's not psychological. You're like, oh, I see what I'm doing now. And you can really mold a mix that way. It definitely helps in the mastering as well.
Yeah. Yeah, particularly at the bottom end, I mean, it's a huge, and you guys, you know, you're spending 80% of your day in the bottom end. That's where all the energy is. That's where the heat is, and you want it to be right. Kicks and basses against each other, how they play and how they play on smaller systems. Your speakers are everything for that.
Definitely, and I mean, I mix on them. I mean, I have my near fields when someone's in the booth and just tracking, you know, so you don't get ear fatigue. And I'm pretty good endurance with that. But I mostly mix on the big ones, and I'll put it low, and it's a lot of times clients will be in there playing it at normal volume, listening level that we can talk at this volume, and they're like, all right, crank it up, let's put it on the big speakers. You can listen to the big speakers the whole session. You know, that's how they're quiet as a lamb, and they will roar if you want them to, accurately.
Yeah. While we're talking about bottom end, and I'm curious to your take on this, getting the bottom end right on the type of stuff. Most people here are doing urban, hip-hop, R&B kind of stuff, right? Yeah, it's all.
That's why I started the first few tracks like that. The first 8 tracks or so is all,
it's for you guys. So, bottom end, getting kicks and 808s and basses and stuff.
Yeah, I mean, well, first of all, you know, 808s, most producers know, it's a note usually. It is a bass note. So if it's going boom, that is a note somewhere. So that's one type of kick. Then usually, depending on what you want the track to sound like, you're going to want some punch as well. Because yeah, the 808 will sound nice on speakers like this and up and in someone's car that's got a system. But you put it on a smaller system, you're like, I don't hear the resonance of where is that? It's gone. And now you have no punch anymore. So all you're hearing is your clap, your snare, and whatever else. And you need that punch in there too. So you got to hit a hard kick in there with your 808, if that's what we're talking about, 808s and that type of bass and that type of track. You're going to have to layer. And layering is one thing, and picking the right samples are the other thing. You can't just throw any 808 sample and layer it with the same kick, and sometimes it doesn't work because that hard kick has low end to it also. So whether you could put an analyzer to it and see what frequency you got to notch out, or a lot of times I don't have to do that because you could hear it. I'll take a real slight Q, which is like in a parametric EQ. You can narrow the frequency band what you want. And as soon as you hit the frequency, all of a sudden the bass dries out. You're like, okay, it's at 42 hertz. I know that's where it's excessive. Then you got, so you can, let's say you get your your kick's sounding good, it's boom, boom, it's sounding nice, it's hitting hard. You go to your near field, you go to little small speakers, which I have too, like Ortone type. I'm on an RCA, just 3-inch speakers. So now that's hitting good, you're like, all right, I hear the kick good. Now if the track has, sometimes they'll put another bass line in it. So now you got a bass line, now you got to contend with the low end on the bass. So on the instrument of the bass, either you're notching out the frequencies to stay away from the 808 frequencies, or you curtail the 808 a little bit to have some hum from the bass. And that is subjective, that's your ears. There's no formula for it. It's what works best for the track, what works best to your ears and the producer of the track. They're the ones that are going to eventually make the decision, and of course I recommend, be like, see how this sounds? Now look, if we do this, put the bass up more. And you're like, that's kind of what a reggae artist would do. They don't want the punch. This is a generalization, of course. But they don't want the punch, they just want that sine bass, just, and the kick, yeah, they want to hear it, but no, they just want the rumble. So you experiment that. Now the bass has gone out of the way. Now, more often than not, there's going to be synths. Now synths invariably, although that's your lead and the mid-range, and that's what you're going to hear most, has a lot of low-end energy. And to tell you the truth, a lot of times, some of the samplers out now, like the Omnispheres and even NI, their samples are so good, there's so much bottom end, and they're so robust, the strings, you have it in the track by itself, it's like, wow, that's, a 100-piece orchestra. But you put it in your track, and it'll swallow up your kick, swallow up your bass, it'll swallow up everything. So you do have to notch out the frequencies of the string track, the synth track, that lead polysynth. I mean, a lot of times I'll play a track and I'll even glance over at the woofers, the 215s, and I see they're doing this. So I know there's extra low end energy in one of the samples, probably wasn't meant to be there, even on a clap. It's like, I'm hearing the clap, why am my woofer's excursion going like this? Because some 10 hertz frequency that no one notched out or the company didn't take out. So you notch it out, and you just doing that alone, you just freed up so much more energy in the low end where you couldn't get the kick that loud before. All of a sudden you're like, oh, now I can bring up the kick, my speakers aren't farting out. Because yeah, there was that low energy there that it's not even audible.
So you're high passing anything that doesn't have, that you don't want the low end to really speak, you're high passing it at whatever.
Well, there's a lot of instruments you're like, all right, here's the sound. And again, this is subjective. This is your ears carving the mix out to your taste. I'm listening to a piano, and you're like, all right, I see how it goes in this mix, even if it's a hip-hop track. You're like, okay, let me start rolling it off, see where I take away the low end where it starts to affect it. Like, okay, now it's starting to sound tinny. All right, so let me back it off a little. All right, that still sounds natural. And then I'll go, okay, I'm at like, I don't know if you guys know the frequency stuff, so let's say it's like 250 hertz, and it still sounds okay. And then I'll bring it back to say, all right, am I missing something? And either you are or you aren't, but then you put back your instruments and you say, okay, yes, no, I don't hear a difference, then we're cutting it. We don't need to have that energy there. Move across your mix like that. And that's kind of how you carve space, because there's only so much space you can fit it. It's a terrible thing, you want to get everything in there, and if you do that, your mix won't be musical, it's just a big wall of sound. You'll be like, your mix is loud as hell, I can't hear anything separate. It's just a wall of sound. But that's how you carve your mix out. And then...
What is your philosophy on mono versus stereo? Because some people I've heard, they say it's good to mix in mono once you got things settled to a certain point. They say it's cool to mix in mono, and then... Well,
you're working, most of the times you're working with all stereo tracks. I mean, a lot of times that question gets asked when I'm bouncing down tracks in whatever beat software or machine that you're using or even playing. Should I put it to stereo? Should I put it to mono? And the real answer is, well, it's either a stereo sound or it's not. Is there different information in left and right channel? Like usually most string patches, they either swirl or the low end is to the left and the right. So, and you can hear it over the sound field. But a lot of times kicks and snare, no, it's right down the middle. Left channel, you hit left channel only. It sounds the same as the right. So that's a mono track. Can't be hurt to run it in stereo because it's just taking up space. That's all that's doing. But as far as when you're mixing and putting it to mono, the only thing I see that's helpful is if you're you hit mono and all of a sudden everything drops out. That means you have a phase problem. That means, you know, one channel, your sine waves like that, on the other channel, your sine waves like that, the opposite, and it cancels out. But most systems are stereo. Clubs, I think, and stadiums are really mono, like front and back.
Yeah, that's why I'm asking, because
it's such a big thing, it won't matter.
When you go to the club, like I heard it hits more mono-wise than actually stereo or something like that. Like,
well, right, you're just going to fill the thing with sound. That's why you don't hard pan really anything. You don't do 100% left, 100% right, unless it's a stereo string sound because it's somewhere in the middle if that's the sampling. But if you're putting a vocal all the way to the right, all the way to the left, look, I mean, I plenty of times you sit in someone's car like, well, it's not hitting like it's hitting in the studio. You know, well, you wanted me to hard pan it. Your right speaker has a blown tweeter. Your left speaker's good. Yeah, it sounds real low on the right side. Or what's that rumbling? Well, you got change in the pocket over here, so it's rumbling. It wasn't in the mix. So stuff like that happens. So it really shouldn't matter. Only if you have a mono button and things drop out, you know something's out of phase in your mix.
I was talking to Roy about this earlier about my mixes, like for the quality of my music, like it never goes like above 0, like the final mix, but it's
you can't. Well, in the digital realm, it can't.
Well, I mean, like below -3, but like I can't get it any louder without feeling like I'm distorting it. Like
okay, well, all right, you go into the mastering parts. So if your mix, I think that's what you're talking about.
Well,
right?
not necessarily. Like I'll throw a compressor on there and like I'll what I've been doing.
When you say on there, meaning the master bus.
Yes.
Okay.
Or output before the master, but what I've been doing lately with my compressor is I'll turn the threshold all the way up, turn the ratio all the way down, and then I'll turn the gain down and turn it up to where it sounds good, and then I'll start working with the threshold and ratio.
And start coming back.
Yeah.
So you have the threshold all the way up, or all the way down.
All the way up, like.
So it's not affecting anything, and the ratio. Oh well, right. So basically, you're bypassing everything.
Yeah, and then like I'll put a gain through the compressor to bring it up to a nice volume, and then work it.
Well, the first thing I'll tell you, if you're going to put a compressor on the master bus, it's got to be a multi-band compressor. It can't be a regular compressor because if you, all right, we're talking about the bass. If you have something hitting the bass every time, that's the pump and breathing. If you hit every time the bass hits, it's going to clamp down on the whole mix. Because people ask what a compressor is or how do you use it. A compressor is like, it's an audio shock absorber. So something hits it slowly and then lets off of it. And lets off of it, that's the release time, and how fast it clamps down on it is the attack. That's the basic of a compressor. So you're able to clamp down on the dynamics, hopefully inaudibly, and in doing that, it brings up the low-level stuff. So that's when a mix is hitting digital 0, and then you have that so you can't go above that. That's as loud as your mix is going to get. Then it's clamping down on the dynamics, so now the highest peak is here, and the lowest energy is here. So now you have all that extra room to bring up the whole thing. Now all of a sudden your mix pretty much sounds the same, and you just made it that much louder, and then it hits digital 0. That's kind of the essence of the mastering part, making it louder.
So
that makes sense to you guys, hopefully it did.
Yeah. So that's not necessarily done in the mix, it's more on the mastering side?
Yeah, you're not worried about the volume. In the mix, which I will say is still the most important part of your project. That's where all the bells and whistles happen, that's where you shape the sound, that's where you're EQing the vocals, because once it's done, mastering, there's a ton of compromises that have to be made. You can sweeten it all you can, but it's usually at the expense, depending on how good equipment you have, it's expense of compromising something else. I can bring up the snare, but now the vocals are going to be a little harsher. Or I can bring up the vocals, but now the clap is peaking out too much more than I wanted to because they're both in the same frequencies, kind of. Right?
The way I tell my clients in LA, every time I fix something in mastering, I break 2 things. So if you want,
it's kind of that's
it's a bit like that. It's like but I mean, I will break the snare and the keys to get the vocal to work properly because the vocal is killer it's important for a
right. If
master.
You need the vocals to be there, then pretty much
You make those compromises, and not break is a strong word, but it's definitely for you guys. You want to be focusing on the mix, and your mastering should be just to make it louder, make it so that it's competitive enough to give to people, or to get it out there, get it online, or whatever you're doing.
I don't know if I totally finished it. Did I answer your questions? So yeah, I mean, multi-band compressor. So when the bass hits, well, depending on how you have it set, what frequencies are the compressor and the ratio for that, all those frequency band, 5-band or whatever you have, we use a 5-band, it'll only clamp down on the low end, so it's not addressing the snare. You know, if the snare's hitting while bass is hitting, all of a sudden, oh, my music just dropped out. Well, if it's the bass hitting, it just dropped down everything. So no, it only drops down that part of the mix, and everything else stays the same. And then obviously limiters on top of that, which is like a super hardcore compressor. No big wall limiter at the end of the chain, usually.
And I think a huge part of getting level in, you know, mixes that go loud well are mixes that are well balanced, frequency-wise, where you've got nice energy in the high mids, stuff that
you can have your bass kicking and that'll all be great, but it still can be balanced, and you'll still say the thing sounds great. You know, it doesn't have to be just a kick and everything else is secondary. You know, kick and vocals. And some tracks are. Look, some tracks we in the studio we'll compare them to you know, whoever's big right now, whether it's a Future track or a Ross track, and we say, okay, we got to make sure it hits like that. And a lot of times it's hitting even better, and we'll dumb it down, for lack of a better word, to make it sound like that. Because they're like, I hear it, they're like, I know it sounds better, but we want to make it sound like this, because look, it's sales. You want to make sure on the club when they play that, yours at least sounds like that. Don't stray from the formula too much. Yeah.
Now, on radio, are we hearing a master or are we hearing a mix? Because I know there's
no.
difference between
when they release it, it's a mastered version of it.
Okay, on radio or whatever.
Yeah, the radio compresses it more. That's just for, I guess, FCC, how much wattage they can put out. They want every radio station wants to be the loudest, but so they compress it again. I always heard that people say that radio sounds better than the CD, and I'm like, no, it's a curtailed frequency response. And your radio in your car, how it's set up, if the radio is louder than the CD, well, that's just your CD player. It doesn't put out as much as the radio does. That's just how that's made. But no, radio is much more lower hi-fi.
You got another question back there?
Yeah. I've dropped like songs off the CDs into a project, or let's say in Cubase in the window, and I noticed that the master always shows that it's peaking. And you're saying
that's because two things. It's how the software is recognizing it. So it could be off by 0.1, 0.2 dB, and it'll put it into the red. How the meters are, you know, Cubase might have it where if you get that close to digital zero, it's going to show you in the red. No, most mastering engineers, I mean, minus 0.1, the highest. I don't know, what do you go to?
Lately, minus 0.5 because of the MP3 thing, and when I'm doing the iTunes masters, I go a little lower again. You know,
I mean, if that type of stuff is barely noticeable.
Yeah, it's
you just want to be below digital zero for different hiccups.
There's a couple of things that happen that probably for you guys, actually one of the most important things you can do right now. Who's heard of Mastered for iTunes? Have you heard anything about it? So there's a whole movement called Mastered for iTunes, which Apple they're trying to make masters sound better on iTunes. And one of the things that happens when you and all of us, I get this every week with clients. I send them mixes. All of us, when we put our stuff up online, when you guys put a track up, like who's using SoundCloud? Bandcamp? Who's got tracks on Facebook? YouTube? Spotify? Okay, so they all use different compression schemes. They're all using different, and paying attention to how you get your stuff up. One of the very best things you can do is upload a WAV file instead of uploading an MP3, because a lot of websites will take your MP3 and reconvert it again, and you get this thing happening, and it sounds like your track is underwater and it doesn't hit anymore. So take the time to upload a WAV file. The other most important thing you can do is, even though all of the CDs, you know, you're buying and checking, or the tracks you're buying offline, if they're going to zero, if you keep your master fader, your limiter threshold down to like minus 0.5 or minus 0.6, when the software converts, like iTunes or any site, when it converts your mix into the compressed format, like YouTube or whatever, you get a whole, if you go to zero, you'll get a ton of distortion. And we all sort of accept a bit of distortion in our tracks because we've got to get the level. But when you hear the extra distortion that iTunes adds or Spotify or whatever, it can be pretty nasty. I was just listening the other day, because we're working with her dad, Colby Calais. She's like a poppy kind of Taylor Swift type stuff. I was just listening to one of her tracks on Spotify, and it's like this straight up kind of clean pop track, and it just crunches like fuck about 10 seconds in, like to where you're like, my computer's broken. And it's like, this is a huge pop production, like with a massive budget, and someone just went all the way to 0 and it craps out on Spotify. So that's a key thing you guys can do. Just to threshold the limiter, bring it back to -0.5, -0.6 if you've got a lot of low end.
And it won't make that much of a difference.
Yeah, and like in terms of like you're saying, oh, it's quieter. It's barely noticeable, you know, and it'll make things play better online. Sorry, man, this is your show. Yeah.
So basically, always leave headroom under nominal, like 0.5 every time.
Well, level, just to leave a little bit there.
For CDs, for CDs.
Well, like you say, they do conversions. Look, everyone's tracks don't sound the same when you put to YouTube because they're reconverting it. You know, they're worried about your 1080p and blah blah. Yeah, it's great, it's super clear, but they will recompress it. That's
difference between a WAV file and an AIFF file?
just a format.
So, like,
there's no sound difference in it. It's just what you like. Yeah.
Cool. So as long as you're up.
Don't convert it if you. Well, I mean, I know we're both Pro Tools guys, but whatever software you're using, if it's Digital Performer or and you're recording in WAV, then you keep it in WAV. Whatever you bounce down, it's in WAV. Whatever you export, unless you want to email something, so you go down to WAV.
So you just
can record in AIFF. It allows it.
So you just basically always want to bounce in a lossless file because it's going to get compressed no matter where you put it.
Yeah, you always, and I tell most of my clients, I said, if here's a CD of your final product, keep that as the lossless wave, put it on your drive, and then encode it to MP3 so you can at least send it out to whoever you want to send it out to, because not everyone's going to use the send space or when you send it, because it gets kind of cumbersome. Especially most people are downloading on their phone, so.
Separate question. One last time. How often does it happen where you get a mix that's so good that the master, that you're not really going to do much to it in the mastering except maybe like improve its level?
I'm
sure that is.
Well, if it's just improving the level, then you did what you needed to do. But if the mix is that good, I mean, I'm the first one to say, don't waste your time. Well, why are we doing this? I can make it a little better, but at the expense of, I don't know if it's worth it.
Right.
I'll tell you, rarely do the mixes come in where they're all that. I mean, sometimes it's a budget thing, and definitely you can make it sound way better. Their stereo track to what we can do.
Right.
You can make it sound way better, but if it's at the point where you're like, this thing sounds good, why do you want to mess with it? Usually because the mixer already had put some limiters and stuff on it already, so that's why it's loud, and you're like, yeah, I can make it a little louder. You want it a little louder? Okay, let's make it a little louder. It doesn't take long. Makes everything.
Thanks so much.
Yeah, no problem.
What's being charged? You charge by track,
hourly. What fast?
What fast? I go to the longest session.
No, you do the 16-hour sessions, yeah. But not just on one song, maybe two. Those are big mixes, like, if a track is taking that long, 8 hours easily you could do a track if it involves singing and rapping and mixing down the beat and really doing some production tricks. Yeah, it'll take a full day to do that. But there's bulk outreach.
How much you charge?
Music here. It's not really a secret. I'm sure I'm not sorry. No, go to insanesounds.com. It's all there. I publish everything.
My question's a two-part question. I use Logic, and whenever I go to bounce a file, it gives me the option of offline or real time. Does that make a difference?
I mean, I know there's on the forums and Pro Tools are like, I think I hear a difference. I don't know, you test it out. If you think it hears a difference, if you hear a difference with it.
And the second...
I mean, I would always say, I do it, well, mine is real time. For now, it's real time. So I'm not making the computer crunch anymore. I don't want any glitches while it bounces down. So the less strain on the CPU, the better. That's so. What is yours, offline or?
Real time.
Yeah, I would always do real time.
The second part is there's a normalize setting. Do you use that? I've heard
no, that's an automatic bringing it up to 0.
Okay.
I mean, it probably has a parameter to what point. So if you're not putting anything on your master bus, like it's just playing the mix, it breathes, it sounds good, and you're not putting anything on the master bus, then you could probably use that if you were just going to give your client a reference. So it's just saying, all right, just because my master fader never went above -2.0 dB, you can make it so it goes to 1. So he has it. So it's the loudest you can make it if you're not going to start mastering. Is that a good answer?
We getting there, Jay?
Yeah?
Yeah.
Any more questions? Say one more question.
I got a question. How can I get the vocals out of the sample from the EQ on the
special plug-in that we made.
Special plug-in that just takes everything out of the
We've had a lot of trouble with you today already. So guys, I wanna thank Mark for coming in, and you know, go check out his Facebook page. Yeah.
What's your information?
For Mark's website is insanesounds.com.
And he's PMC-speakers.com.
Yeah. So
yeah, phenomenal ones. You know, like you heard these guys.
I just
he's not going to tell you prices either.
I just want to say one more thing while we have the time. So, who all here has had the chance to give their track to someone serious, someone in the business, someone that they felt was an opportunity? Like, who's had a real shot at getting a beat to someone important? A couple of people. When you guys have something hot, something that you know is good, something that your friends are reacting to, this isn't my personal thing, I just want to relate it to you. There's a tendency in this industry to think we're all good at everything. And we're not. I just wrote this on a forum yesterday. I'm a shitty fucking plumber. I'm very bad at repairing cars. I kill plants all the time. There's things I'm good at in the world, there's things I'm bad. I've taken some numbers here from people who are writing great beats. When you get something hot, if you're mixing at home on little tiny speakers, take the time to get someone who knows how to mix. You know, sit with Mark, go to someone like Mark, especially if you're living here in town, and treat your track right. If you've got a great idea, if you've got a great beat, give it the time it needs. 4 hours with you can bring a beat across the line and make it sound banging and make it sound pro.
Yeah, from the mix level.
And when you give it to that guy, when you get that opportunity, you have a finished mix that's pro. It's a huge opportunity. So you know, don't be afraid. And what you will learn sitting down with a guy like Mark in 4 hours, you know, SAE is cool, but you know, learning from real engineers on a real session is a cool thing. So don't be afraid and look Mark up. He's doing some serious work. That's it.
Right. Thank you. Two quick things. First, clap it up for my man Mark for coming out.